Thank you for joining me today. So this whole month is National Anti-Bullying Month, and I'm excited to talk about this because as a school counselor, as a licensed mental health counselor, I know the impact that bullying can have on not just kids, but people and even into their adult years. So this is a topic that I'm very passionate about and is really important to me to get some awareness about and to help families figure out how to navigate it, help children figure out what to do, and really just to end bullying. We'll talk about some of the reasons that it might start, and those who are on the side of being bullied or those who are on the side of being bullies. We can work together to help to address all of those situations and really hopefully to eradicate bullying altogether. So I just wanted to introduce myself. I am Erica Sickles, and I am the school counseling coordinator at Lutheran Counseling Services. And I have been doing this is my 4th year at Lutheran Counseling Services. And prior to that, I was a school guidance counselor working mostly in middle school. And, as you can imagine, this is a topic that comes up a lot. And like I said, it's one that's really a passion of mine to really help educate families about, really prevent for students and help students to get through. And then honestly, my own experience included some bullying, which probably is what led me into the field of counseling and guidance counseling as well. So today we're talking about bullying basics, battles, and building bridges. And so that's kind of my idea of how to conceptualize this. There's definitely some basic information we all need to know in order to understand bullying. There's some battles with it. It is hard to be either on the receiving or giving end, and we know a lot of things about how to work with both those populations, and really that leads to building bridges of mental health, building bridges of connection, building bridges of respect and resilience. And so those are the things that we'll be talking about today. So again, it's really important to understand what bullying is. That sounds a little weird, but as we think about it, and as I hear students talk about it, teachers even, and parents talk about it, sometimes we're using the word bullying and we're overusing it and not quite always catching what actual bullying is. So we'll talk about some differences between bullying and meanness and rudeness. And then we'll talk about types of bullying. When I had my own experiences, the internet really wasn't a thing. So there's definitely, with the advancements in technology, there's definitely other ways that bullying can happen that we want parents and teachers to be aware of. So we're going to talk about who is bullied. We know a little bit about some characteristics that may make some children a little bit more likely to be bullied, and then some characteristics that may make children a little more likely to be bullies. And we're going to talk about what to do in both of those situations and how to handle it and who to bring on board in your team to address those things. And really, we're talking about building resilience in kids. We know that when we have resilience, that we can get through anything easier, and that includes bullying. And then we're talking about building respect, and that is the word of the month. In our school counseling program, we focus on a different character building trait every single month. And for this month of October, for National Anti-Bullying Month, that's the word we're focusing on, is respect. And really, as we go into schools across Central Florida, we're really trying to step into those places where maybe we're struggling to respect people across differences. There's a lot of differences in the world. And the pandemic has brought out a lot more differences. And so being able to show that respect, hold that respect, know what it looks like, and be able to practice it even across differences is really important, and something that we're encouraging all our students to be able to do. And so really, to get into this, we're going to talk about, again, bullying gets overused. And so we actually can differentiate between bullying, mean behavior, and rude behavior. And so this comes from the American School Counseling Association, and Sine Whitson is sort of a leading expert in this area, and she really kind of identified each of these 3 areas. So rude might be inadvertently saying or doing something that hurts someone else. You know, as a younger child, I would kind of consider some kids might say something rude. I have freckles. That isn't a thing that maybe everyone understood or really liked about me. And so they might say something about my freckles. And so it was inadvertent most of the time. And it might have hurt my feelings depending on the way they said it. Mean behavior would be purposefully saying something or doing something to hurt someone one time. Usually it's based on their own angry feelings. And so, yeah, that might be commenting about something in a really unkind way, saying it in that they are trying to be mean. It is purposeful, but that's a differentiated point between bullying, because bullying is intentionally aggressive behavior. It's repeated, so it happens more than once. And then there's an imbalance of power. So as parents, as teachers, as other adults who care for kids, as we're hearing them come to us and say, I'm being bullied, I was bullied at school today, this can be a conversation that we step into to help the children understand, is it truly bullying? Is it mean behavior, or is it rude behavior? And it doesn't mean we excuse mean or rude behavior, but it does mean we handle it differently. So bullying is a very different thing than mean or rude behavior. And so again, I really like Whitson's idea here. I love alliteration. So purpose is the purpose of the behavior to hurt you or intentionally be aggressive and hurtful. Is there a pattern? Meaning, is it repeated? If this is the first time someone did something, unless it's very specific categories or very, very aggressive or violent, it's typically not bullying if it's the first time it happened. There has to be some kind of a pattern or repetition to it. And then, is there an imbalance of power? And sometimes we have to look a little more deeply to see that imbalance of power. Age is pretty obvious for some of us. It could be, you know, an older child picking on a younger child. There is that imbalance of power. But as we look deeper, sometimes there's an imbalance of power in sort of social status, in ability in some way, in popularity. And so those kinds of imbalances of power might be important to look at as well to see if this truly is bullying behavior. There's also this great screening tool that will be available at the end in the resources that can also be a great conversation starter. People can use this in their classrooms, parents can use this at home, and really it just helps children or adolescents to know, is this bullying? And then how do we handle it? And so it's just a quick yes or no. It's a great conversation starter. And really, again, it's addressing those 3 criteria to help us know if it is bullying. And really the main thing for kids to understand, or even adolescents, is that if it truly is bullying and it meets those 3 Ps that we were talking about, then it really does need to be addressed alongside adults. At that point, it has gotten beyond just a child working to figure it out, and adults do need to be involved, whether at the school, parents, or other trusted adults. So again, like I said, you know, when I was experiencing bullying back in my middle school days, it looked a little different. We always had physical bullying, you know, that's the running into you and pushing you up against the locker. Social bullying could be excluding someone, kind of talking about someone. You kind of picture some kids kind of talking to each other, covering their faces and almost like whispering about each other, really ostracizing someone else verbally or socially, I should say. Verbal bullying is more of aggressive verbal things that you might say that are attacking or aggressive towards somebody else. Again, very mean, very intentionally hurtful. But then this whole category of cyberbullying recently is really becoming a concern. As we think about it, younger and younger children have access to the internet, have access to social media platforms, even the games that they are playing have access to other kids involved in those games. And so that can be a really big challenge for parents to understand what's going on, what kind of other interactions are there in those realms. So for that reason, I'll just spend a few moments here talking about cyberbullying. And really, I always say it's never too early to start these conversations. Like I said, even really little, sometimes preschoolers are engaged in playing games that involve the internet in some way, where they might be able to switch over into a mode that involves other people that aren't, in your control. And so children of all ages really can benefit from learning about safe online practices, really helping them to understand that they can't give any of their personal information, and really helping them think through how someone else might try to get that information from them. Really, social media use is starting in elementary school in a lot of ways, and I've seen this, and if I'm honest, in my own house, we've done this. The pandemic has really led to trying to keep kids connected to other kids. And so sometimes that means using a device to do that. And at least it has over the last couple of years. So children really do need the help to navigate those social challenges, to cope with and resolve them, and they need that support. So as parents, it's really a balance between kind of checking in, seeing what's going on, providing that needed support. And just developmentally, we know that kids are going to be developing their social skills in many different ways. And the COVID pandemic has shifted a lot of those ways that they are developing those social skills. And so online use has also shifted those ways. So helping them to understand what their online self is like, and how closely that mirrors their in-person or in real life self, and helping them to really be genuine in those ways, but also helping protect them. You don't have to share everything about yourself online with these games. I know in a lot of cases, the kids that I work with very genuinely have true friendships with people they've never met in real life. And so that definitely has some benefits, but of course it comes with some of these risks as well. And so really thinking about and monitoring, the kinds of things that they're being exposed to, and being a little bit more involved, sitting next to them while they're using even YouTube, as you think about, and children can get on all sorts of videos. Sometimes they'll get videos that just really aren't appropriate for their age to watch. But even on videos that are age appropriate, sometimes if they start scrolling through the comments, and as parents, we can do that and should do that. Sometimes the comments really are not kind, and can be quite aggressive, and in some cases can be considered cyberbullying. And so for that to play out in these online methods is really a challenge that a lot of parents and kids need to learn how to face in these times. So what can parents do? It's important to remember that some trying out of quote unquote bad behavior is developmentally appropriate. We have even, little toddlers who go and they take a toy from someone. They're figuring it out. That's part of the natural developmental process and learning the social skills. So understanding that is true throughout the developmental lifespan. A little bit of trying out of this quote unquote bad behavior is normal. And so as parents, we need to be very clear, very consistent in our expectations and in how we respond to kids, so that we can be very clear. And, if we want a behavior to stop, we need to step in and be clear about that and consistent. It's also, I always like to talk about sibling relationships, because that is really the first place that kids are learning social skills. And oftentimes it is a place where they do this trying out or testing of bad behavior. And so really monitoring that, making sure that it's overall positive. All kids are going to have their squabbles. There's going to be some sibling rivalry, but overall really working to help build positive social relationships within the family is huge. It's also important for parents to know that we cannot know everything that our child does online. There are a lot of apps where we can monitor pretty heavily, but really it comes down to building a trusting relationship with our child, talking openly and honestly about these things. And like I said, you can never start too early. And the flip side is you can never start too late. If this is a thing that's just coming on your radar, now's the time to start. Ask your child, what kinds of things do they do online? What kinds of things do they do at school? What kinds of things do they do in their personal life? And really get acquainted with how they're using devices, how they're using technology, and be a person that they can come to when and if they have issues, and help them to kind of know what those things look like. So that can be having that conversation of what's just mean or rude versus what is clipping over into this bullying or cyberbullying kind of category, in which case, yes, always bring in a trusted adult for that. I also think it's really helpful to just have what I call the tech talk, device ownership. Parents own the devices that the kids are using for most of the time that the kids are using it. So setting up some of the rules of the device, how they're going to present themselves online, what's going to happen. There are responsibilities that children have in keeping themselves safe, responsibilities that the parents have in keeping themselves safe. And this can get much more complicated as kids might go between different homes, as different siblings kind of come and go, and there might be different ages and different rules for different ages, and that's appropriate, but can be a challenge to helping younger kids understand their limitations, and then older kids understand their limitations as well as maybe some of their responsibilities with that. So really talking about these things and thinking about them proactively ahead of time is really important. And then of course, when issues arise, addressing those as openly and honestly as we can. And we really want our children to see us as resources and as support systems for them, no matter what they've done online or elsewhere, to be the place they can come to with that and to work through it together. And so I love this quote: bullying is a conscious choice to be cruel. So the bully is making that decision. And so what we know from research is that children who bully lack that empathy. So they really struggle to have that ability to know what it feels like to be in someone else's shoes and to have compassion for others' pain and suffering. And so, even as early as, little kids, toddlers even, are learning this. At that age, they don't quite understand what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. And so working on ways to do that throughout the lifespan can be really important. I'm a really big believer of just kind of pausing a movie, stopping in the middle of a book that I'm reading with my kids, and just kind of talking about it. How did that character feel? And then even asking your kids, how would you feel if that happened to you? What would that be like? And really kind of stepping into those spaces, because that really helps build empathy in them. With little kids, they can even put on your shoes as parents and walk around. Little kids love to do that. And, even as they get older, you can ask them, what do you think it's like to be a day in my life? You think about some of the movies that go through that, where parents and kids switch places. And so that can be a good way to kind of think about it and have them think beyond themselves. Again, back to the sibling relationships, that can be a way to help them think about, what do you think it's like to be like your brother? What do you think your brother's day is like? Your sister's day? If it's an only child, you can ask about cousins or classmates or just other people. And again, really just kind of finding those organic times and spaces where they can step into what is it like to be this other person, and just start to take some guesses at what that feels like. And that's absolutely, we know from research, a skill that people can develop. And it just takes a little bit of awareness and kind of focusing on what it might like to be somebody else. And that starts to build that empathy. So we'll talk a little bit here about those who are being bullied and those who are the bullies. So I get this question a lot. Why do kids bully? And like most everything, there's complicated answers. There isn't one size fits all, but this is a pretty good list of that most kids who bully are going to fall into one or more of some of these things here. So a big one I see, they don't know how to solve conflicts. They haven't, maybe it hasn't been modeled to them, maybe they just never learned, and so they don't have better conflict solving skills. And so bullying is what kind of comes out. They're attempting to fix a problem, and it comes out in that way. Sometimes they don't have other ways or healthy ways of expressing feelings of frustration or anger. And so again, it comes out in this way. Oftentimes I see if there's unclear boundaries. Now, this can be at home, this can be in a classroom setting. A lot of times we see that bullying happens in sort of free time, let's say the recess sort of times or the lunch times out of school, because the boundaries are a little looser or they're just not clear. There's not as much supervision, maybe that can be a problem. Sometimes it's emotional problems in the bully, low self-esteem. They were bullied themselves. So some of that is kind of learned. They don't know how to solve conflicts. This is the only way they've been taught how to solve conflicts. Or sometimes it's not feeling good about themselves and trying to elevate their status in some way. Because again, remember, bullying has that imbalance of power. And so sometimes by elevating yourself, by being scary or, hurting other people, it can make you feel powerful for a little bit. And that can be a remedy to low self-esteem. Sometimes, again, insecurity, jealousy, some of these things might be driving that behavior. Again, that low empathy, not really understanding what it feels like to be in someone else's shoes, or sometimes peer pressure. Sometimes people know, kids might know if this isn't the right thing to do, and maybe that child wouldn't do it, but they know they can get someone else to do this mean thing. And so maybe kids feel pressured to bully others in that way. So we also know from research some of the characteristics of bullies. And so we tend to see that bullies are more impulsive. They may have anger management problems. They may be more interested in controlling others, manipulating maybe, rather than being a leader and guiding. They may be prone to frustration or feel annoyed very quickly. Again, they may be lacking that empathy. You might notice a pattern of blaming the victims. Well, it was their fault in some way, and that is kind of how they look at it. They may be kids who have difficulty following rules, little respect for authority. Maybe they view violence in a positive way. Sometimes as you think about what kids are exposed to, it can be entertaining. As we think about, even YouTube videos, sometimes there's sort of this entertainment factor of like pranking or some other things that does actually lead into those categories of bullying. Sometimes someone's just physically stronger than their peers. That tends to be more common for boys and the way they might enter into bullying. Or for girls, it's maybe more popular for them to be, or it's maybe more common for them to be more popular. And so to kind of keep that popularity, that's sort of where the bullying behavior comes from. And so we know those tend to be some of the characteristics of bullies. Now, all bullies have all of these, but as we can kind of figure out which ones may be driving the behavior, that's a pretty important first step to being able to curb that behavior and help the person learn other ways of dealing with other people. So we also know from research some of the characteristics of those who are bullied. So those who are, if you want to say, the victims of bullying. I think here it's really important to pause and just be very clear. Even though there are some traits that may go along with those who are bullied, the bullying is the responsibility of the bully. And it has to do with the bully's bad choices, not to do with these particular traits. But we do tend to know that sometimes these are the traits in the people who tend to be bullied more often than others. So sometimes it is the talented, the smart, the creative. As we think back to the reasons for bullying, the jealousy and some of those other things, that makes some sense. That the talented, smart, or creative people tend to be the targets more often. That's if it's a socially isolated person, few or no friends, then that can be an easier target, again, because there's less supervision, there's less other people kind of watching or monitoring this. And so that might just be an opportunity sort of thing. And we know across differences is often where bullying takes place. So ability or disability, across racial differences, sexual orientation differences, any physical features, religion, culture, any sort of difference could make somebody more likely to be a target for bullying behavior. And then if they're just somehow vulnerable, so maybe the more introverted person, the more anxious person, more submissive, maybe someone who's more depressive, that kind of goes along sometimes with socially isolated. And so it's more of an opportunity that arises that leads to increasing that possibility. And so again, there's nothing inherently wrong about these things. It's just what we know from research. And so again, that helps us to know where to start in helping kids manage what's going on. So it's really important to address bullying because unfortunately it really comes with a lot of negative impacts and that they last quite a long time for some people. So there's increases in depression and anxiety in those who are bullied, increases in feelings of sadness and loneliness, loss of interest in activities, health issues, decreased academic achievement. And so these are all maybe warning signs that if you are kind of wondering about a student in your class or a child, to notice. If you start to notice some of these types of things, then that might be an indication that something's going on and it's worth kind of checking in with, and maybe checking in with teachers as well. We also know specifically about suicide that being bullied increases risk of suicide, but many factors contribute to suicide risk, not bullying alone. So as you think about and look at all of that, that there is a correlation there, but it's not necessarily just the bullying that's leading to that, although it is really important to address because that there is a larger risk for suicide in those who have been bullied. So I think about how to handle it as sort of this idea of building a bridge. And so we want to build bridges in a couple different ways. I think the first and most important bridge is to build that bridge with your child, whether it's your student or your own child. Thank the child for talking to you about this. If somehow it comes out that whether you ask or the child brings it to you that they are being bullied, thank them. Let that be the first thing that comes out of your mouth, so that they can really know that you're there to support them. Share empathy, connect to your child's experience, try to understand what's going on. You know, if you have some similar experiences, that's helpful sometimes to share, and really just kind of listen to however much they're willing to share with you. Check in on whatever details you can. Like I said, sometimes we're using the word bullying and we mean rude behavior or mean behavior. So as you get these details, you can start to see that it fully fits into the category of bullying versus maybe a different category. Still, we're going to treat it, in the same way. We're going to thank the child for being open with us and sharing with us, even if it's just mean behavior or rude behavior, because that's still difficult for children to deal with, and they may need some support in that. But the details can help you flesh out exactly which categories it might be in. And then remind your child that it's not their fault. It has to do with the bully's choices. Again, one of the previous slides talked about how sometimes the bully might blame the victim. And so it's important to make sure that we let them know that it's not their fault, and that we're there to help them. This is a really good resource, this 10 Days to a Bully-Proof Child. And in it, she talks about actually a lot of role playing that you can do with your child to help them understand and know what to do if something happens. And so that's a really good resource. You also may want to collaborate with the school. If this is happening at school, it's important that you calmly share what you know. Listen to what the school may know, and remember that changes can take time. Some details may be confidential, as bullying will involve other kids. Some of the details the school may not be able to share with you, but you bringing forward what you know is important in the process. And also knowing that sometimes the school isn't aware of all the details. A lot of times bullies are more are focused on doing the behavior outside of any supervision or, at recess, kind of far, far away from teachers or other adults. And so it's important that when you learn of these things, to bring it to the school in a calm manner, knowing that they may not know yet about those things. And then make a plan to immediately support your child. What are the immediate needs? What can help the child feel safe? Set a time to check back in later about the situation. So as you kind of meet with a teacher or maybe even administrators, as they're aware of the problem and they kind of work to address it, set a time in that first meeting about, hey, we'll follow up in a week and let's see how this is. Check in with your child in that time to see how is it going? Is it getting any better? Is the behavior continuing? Is there any resolution? And then plan fun family time that highlights your child's strengths. Really work to build them up. It's a difficult thing to go through. So really work to see if you can build them up in their strengths and plan some fun times to kind of offset some of the other things that are going on after you've put some things in place that will help them address that. and teach helpful skills. So skills might be assertiveness skills, emotional coping skills, problem solving skills, social skills. Some of these lack in these areas can be what leads to bullying behavior. And so teaching these skills can be really helpful for them to manage it, and then also to have more positive relationships, whether it's with siblings, peers, adults, or anyone. And then, like I said, that previous book does a lot with role playing different situations. And really it helps kids to be able to say exactly what they would say in those situations, and really to think through some situations that may be difficult for them. So here, again, for cyberbullying, it's a little bit more specific. Reach out to a trustworthy adult. I think that's the first piece I always want kids to understand, is to reach out to a trustworthy adult. Once it does get into that category of cyberbullying, encourage them to disengage, log off, block whoever is harassing them, use privacy settings to really make sure they're only getting to connect with people that either they know or that are somehow deemed safe or vetted in some way. Take screenshots of what's going on, because it's easy for others to kind of delete and deny what happened later. So taking those screenshots can be helpful as evidence, but I would say then as the screenshots are taken, take them away from your child. Your child doesn't need to reread that stuff. So have them available where you can step in and move forward on what needs to happen there, and report it if it needs to be reported. So things that happen on school campus can be addressed with the school. Unfortunately, schools are very limited in what they can do if it's not happening during the school day. So that can be a challenge, in that they just can't address it unless it's happening during the school hours on their property. Always that empathy, really, that is a barrier for the kids who are bullying, and those who are being bullied really need to feel like others understand this, are taking it seriously, and then help your child remember they are not to blame, and help them to know how to be a friend, and how to engage properly and appropriately online. So if your child is the bully, it's important to listen to your child, try to see what's going on, what led to their behavior, what's going on in their life overall. Maybe you can figure out from talking to them or just observing what might be kind of triggering this behavior, what kind of qualities or characteristics are going on that's leading to it. If you do see it taking place, intervene right in that moment. Comfort the victim, support expression of feelings or thoughts to each other. Even little kids can, preschoolers can learn to express how they feel. And, I really wanted that toy, that kind of thing. And so it starts young, but even older kids, can learn those social skills with some modeling and some support on how to manage that in the moment. Address any of the underlying issues and characteristics that are going on. Like I said, a lot of times it's anger management. They need a different or better way to handle anger. Maybe there's a lack of structure. There just isn't a lot of supervision and these things are happening. So it's sort of an opportunity that needs to not be allowed to be an opportunity anymore. Unclear boundaries, to start to be really clear about those boundaries. Build that empathy. If they're prone to frustration, help them to kind of manage that, or really just kind of get a sense of what's underlying this and start making some growth in those areas by building basic emotional regulation skills, maybe some assertiveness skills. Bullies tend to be aggressive. And so teaching them what assertiveness looks like can be really helpful. Empathy for others and those things we've talked about before. Be very clear in setting rules and boundaries. I always like when the rules are written down in some way, rules of the family, rules of the classroom. And so then it's really clear. Any of us, when we're having a bad day or we're angry, the way our brain is structured doesn't allow us to think clearly. So having it written down and posted somewhere is really helpful. Their child may not look at that list, but you can quickly refer to it in the classroom or at home, and that can really help get them back on track, or at least understand if they're not following those, they'll understand what the consequence is. Practice empathy, practice social skills, show respect for others and to each other. Be a positive role model if you're really honest with yourself and some of your ways of handling things, maybe on the more aggressive side. Then really work on your own assertiveness skills. Be a positive role model, and limit exposure to not positive role models. If there's others who might be bullies or just maybe more aggressive or not handling social situations in the most positive and productive way, then limit exposure definitely as we're working with the child to switch their behavior. So we also talk a lot, like I said, the word for this month, and the focus is on respect. Last year in our school counseling program, we focused on resilience for the whole year. And really, again, resilience is bouncing back from any kind of challenge, obviously bullying being one of those challenges, and respecting each other is really important, especially across differences. And there will always be differences. As we think developmentally, anything from, toddlers up through adolescence, we're always encountering people that do things differently, look differently than us, think differently than us, believe differently than us, live differently than us. And so building respect, especially across those differences, becomes really important. I love Brene Brown, and I really like this quote, and it's a good reminder for all of us who are important in children's lives. She says, "I think the single most important thing that I learned from my research is this: we cannot give our children what we don't have." And so, as with most things, it starts with a really good, honest look at ourselves, and then moving forward from that, working on ourselves while also building those skills in our children. So as we think about respect, it's first important to just define it. For really little kids, I'll just help them to say, everyone counts, everyone matters, everyone has value. As we get to kind of older elementary or even adolescent kids, we can think about defining it as holding in esteem, holding in honor, treating others with dignity and honor. And then we can, talk to our kids. What does that mean to you when you are held in esteem, when others honor you, or when others show dignity toward you? What does that look like? What does it not look like? The golden rule comes up here quite a bit, of helping others or treating others like we would want to be treated. And so the piece of that, often we think about that as treating others very well, which is obviously an important component, but we also want to think about treating ourselves well. So showing respect for ourselves, if we start to be really kind of negative toward ourselves, talking badly about ourselves, those kinds of things pull down our self-esteem, our self-worth. And as we know from the previous slides, those are the things that lead to some bullying behavior, or could lead to really difficult social interactions. And so being sure that we're respecting ourselves as well, and talking about that as a family, as a class, what that looks like and how we do show that respect. And also show what disrespect looks like. Kids are really quick to tell you. I go into classrooms a lot, and I'll ask them, what does it mean to show disrespect to someone? And they'll give you a long list. So sometimes they can get to understanding what respect is by understanding what disrespect is first, and understanding not to do those things, and instead, in some cases, do sort of the opposite. So it's a good conversation to have with our kids and our students. And so resilience is also hugely important. If we have resilience, then we can bounce back from any kind of challenge or adversity better. So 13 things here that are important to kind of think about. Making kids feel accepted at home, huge. As kids are really little, they're starting to build their attachment styles, and those will really impact how their relationships are for the rest of their life. So helping them to feel accepted at home at every age, whether toddlers, teens, tweens, every age, it really can be helpful, and it starts at home. Nurturing a healthy self-esteem, what they like about themselves, again, respecting themselves and how they talk to themselves. That goes with encouraging that positive thinking about themselves. If they can think positively about themselves, they'll start to think positively about others. Teaching feelings management, even just identifying feelings is really important. And that can be something that we model as adults, and just to say, I'm really frustrated today. This happened at work, and, I just need a moment. And just knowing here's how I feel, and knowing how to manage that in a positive way and modeling that can be helpful. Promoting problem solving skills. Sometimes as parents or teachers, we want to rush in and just fix it for our kids, but helping them get to the answer and helping them problem solve is kind of building that lifelong skill. Helping them focus on the future, kind of understand, goals and growth and who they're becoming as throughout their development. Questioning their critical inner voice. I always try to encourage teens, tweens, adults, anybody. Sometimes we have these negative automatic thoughts and they just kind of pop up there. And so questioning that, a lot of times there is no evidence for that negative thought. It just kind of shows up there. And so sometimes we think about, oh, don't believe everything you see on the internet. I think about, don't believe everything that shows up in your head, have that critical thinking process about it and question some of those negative thoughts that might show up. Encourage kids to try something new. We know that resilience is built through activity and bouncing back from challenges. So, it can be helpful to bounce back from learning a new skill, dribbling a ball, and it maybe doesn't go so well, but over time and practice it does. And so that builds self-esteem and the ability to persevere and push through things. So trying new things and doing that ourselves can be helpful. Addressing problems immediately is important. So as soon as we recognize something's going on, really addressing it right then. And for sure with anything to do with bullying, kids need to know that the adults around them are going to keep them safe. And as soon as we understand that something isn't safe, to step right in. Discourage avoidant behaviors. So that kind of goes back with addressing problems immediately. Once we know there's a problem, we want to try to address it. We don't want to avoid it. If we need a small break, that's one thing. But setting a time, okay, yeah, let's all think about this and we'll come back together. Setting that time to come back together so we don't fully avoid a problem is really important. Reframing negative experiences, and just like with trying new things, sometimes there are some challenges along the way, and we can think about some of the negative or difficult or challenging pieces of that in a different way of reframing it. And so we can think, okay, well, I learned a lot from that, or I really grew through that difficulty. Now I can, dribble a ball and bounce a ball. Looking for self-discovery opportunities. And so really just providing these for our kids where they can learn about themselves, try out new things, especially in adolescence. They're trying to figure out their identity and they might try on different identities before they get there. And so encouraging that can really help. And then just being a good role model, just like that Brene Brown quote, giving kids what we have. We can't give them what we don't have. So role modeling all of these things, having our own resilience, modeling all of these things, sharing our feelings, problem solving, addressing things when we need to. All of these things really do build resilience. We know we can build resilience. We know we can build respect. We know we can build empathy. All of these things are changeable with some effort. And so these can be some ways to do that. So I wanted to share a couple resources. These are going to be available for you to click on and link in the links. And you can look back on the slides that we were on. Some of these, like Cyan Woodson, there's some more resources that you might be able to check in with. That screening tool, if that's something you'd like to print out and go over with your kid or with your classroom, you can do that. That book, that 10 Days to Bully Proof a Child, is also a really good one if you're interested in that. It has a lot of role plays. So there's a lot of resources out there, but really an interest and desire to help kids work through this is really the first thing. So thank you so much for being here and for taking in this information, and consider LCS and our school counseling program, the school counselors at your school, if there's anything else we can do to help address any of these concerns. Thank you so much.